a while since I got to share anything, but it's always a blessing when God lays something on my heart that I want to share. And since we've been going through the book of Romans, this has been something that's been on my heart. So I would ask you to please pray for me in delivering this one, because there have been, in the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of obstacles that I've had trying to put this together, and I can feel that this isn't, I don't think this is something the enemy wants me to share. I've just really felt that all the way up through this morning. But also pray for each other, for those that are here and those that are watching. I know some are, and those that'll listen, that our hearts can be open to what God would maybe have us to learn through all of this. I'm sure you're all hoping for a nice, happy little Hanukkah message, right? Originally, I was told to not keep this too short because I have to give the kids time to do their lesson in the back. But seeing there's not too many kids back there, maybe I'll keep this really long. So does everyone think that it's getting easier or harder to live godly in this present time and place? No one's going to say it's easier. It's interesting that you share that.
And then he wrote down, he learned from what his father wrote, and then wrote down everything he learned that wasn't in it, and so on, and so on, and so on. How is that different than what God did?
I think it's very interesting that you bring that up, because that's exactly where I'm going. But putting off the spiritual eyes for a moment, everything can feel like it's getting harder, right, around us. And I'm not just talking generally, but if in this specific time and place, right here in Morristown, Tennessee, or wherever you live, our circumstances and stuff around us getting easier or harder to live godly. And if we feel that it's getting harder, ask yourself, why? What is different between now and 10 years ago, 15 years ago? Why is the trend? What has changed that's making things harder? So I don't know if you're like me, but it feels like we're on the cusp of something, doesn't it? Just with things that have been ramping up in the last, especially the last 5 years. Feels like we're on the cusp of something. Something's about to happen. Something's about to, it's about to get real. It feels to me like the time's short. And anyone else feel like we're in the last days? Would you claim that? Really believe we're in the... And what's different between now and previous generations that felt they were in the last days? What do we have now, or what has changed now that didn't have several generations? I mean, I'm sure if you were in World War II, you would have thought for sure this has got to be it. And if you were a believer and happened to be Jewish, even all the more so. What about World War I? What has happened since then to now that feels like we are closer? Yep, so everybody's kind of heading in the right direction here. Lots of Lots of distractions. Lots of distractions. Paul says in his letter to Timothy in 2 Timothy 3, understand this, that in the last days hard times will come. For people will be lovers of self, lovers of money, boastful, arrogant, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, hard-hearted, unforgiving, backbiting, without self-control, brutal, hating what is good, treacherous, reckless, conceited, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to an outward form of godliness, but denying its power. It's easy to, when you look at this list here, what brings me back to that old adage, if you scratch the surface of any sin, you find pride. I don't know if anyone else has heard that saying before. But this list starts off at the top, for people will be lovers of self, that pride is the basis of all. When you look at the rest of the list, it goes off of that. For people will be lovers of self. If you love money, it's all about you, right? If you're boastful, it's all about you. If you're arrogant, it's all about you. If you blaspheme, it's all about you. If you're disobedient to parents, it's all about you. If you're ungrateful, it's all about you, and so on. And it's easy to look at that list of all those things that he says this is what's going to happen in the last day and think outside of these doors. But if you take a moment and you go through that list and, okay, let's just bring it right on in here and apply it in here. Can we still have pride in here? Each person in here, can we still love money? Can we still love things? Can that be our focus? How much of our time is spent pursuing that? Can we boast? Are we still capable of being arrogant? God forbid, can we blaspheme? Kids among us, can we still be disobedient to parents? Can we be ungrateful? I've heard messages throughout the years on a lot of those items dealing with different things. But I want to focus on one in particular in this list that I think is one of the most overlooked and most needed today. And it goes along with what a lot of you have brought up: unholy. Because when you look at the first phrase, how it bookends, the last phrase also bookends. Holding to an outward form of godliness, but denying its power. Are we, kind of brings it right inside the doors, because are we capable of holding to the outward form of godliness, putting on all the things that make us look good, make us look godly, and still not have it in us? Didn't he just talk about that last week? That we can look good on the outside and be as corrupt and contaminated inside as a mud puddle. But on the flip side of that, on the reverse side of that, if you have his power, his spirit residing within you, won't it be natural that it's also going to manifest on the outside? Made me think of this comic. It took me a while to find this thing because I remember seeing this years ago. But here it is. It's a little beat up old house, and they're doing renovations inside, and the Holy Spirit interior renovation truck's parked out there. And it says they are renovating the inside right now. I understand they're going to redo the outside later. And it's using that verse under it. Therefore, we don't lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we're being renewed day by day. And that verse is really dealing with the outward, our body is deteriorating, is going downhill. But inside, our spirit is being brought more and more to life. The more we walk with God and walk in his ways, the more the inside gets cleaned up. And the priority is right. You get the inside cleaned up, but the outside will also. Because a fruit, you think of a fig like we were talking about. You can have a fig tree without figs on it. But if you have a fig, it came off of a fig tree. You can have an apple tree that doesn't produce apples, but apples have to come off of an apple tree. So eventually here, especially coming from my trade and dealing with roofing, if you don't eventually get to the outside and clean it up, the inside's going to deteriorate too. So I just thought that was neat, kind of went along a little bit. But anyway, back to holy, kadosh. What is holy? What does holy mean? Kadosh. We've talked about it already today. Set apart, sanctified, dedicated, especially to God in that sense. So am I the only one that feels that it just really feels like almost nothing is holy anymore? Like everything is desecrated. Everything is trampled. Everything's been made common. You think about the most sacred things that we should have, whether it's marriage, relationship between a man and his wife, the home, scriptures, how many things get trampled down and made common. And you wonder, is there really anything set apart to God anymore? Oswald Chambers said, "The destined end of man is not happiness nor health, but holiness. God's one aim is the production of saints. He is not an eternal blessing machine for men. He did not come to save men out of pity. He came to save men because he created them to be holy." Interesting. We were supposed to be holy. We were created different than the rest of creation. We weren't made like everything else because we were made in the image of God. We weren't supposed to be like the animals and everything else out there. We're not just one of them. We're different. Now, tell me, are we trending in holiness or unholiness in that aspect? And yeah, we're told we're just one of the animals. We're just another one out there. And I find that funny and ironic, because if that was true and we're just one of them, then it should be survival of the fittest. And if we happen to be the fittest, then we're going to survive, right? But why is it that ironically the same people that will say that will also be the ones that somehow we're responsible, and we have a responsibility to stewardship and environmentalism and protecting the earth and watching out over the trees and the waters and all this other stuff? Somehow we're on some kind of a higher plane that we're responsible for all of that. No one's out there saying that the lions, tigers, and bears should be doing all that. Vance Havner said, "If you want to be popular, preach happiness. If you want to be unpopular, preach holiness." So I think I desire to be unpopular today. But yet, when we look around at everything we see going around us in our lives, all that we see, hear, and feel, and it does feel like everything's been desecrated and profaned, and it seems like the world's just going on. The evil happens, the wickedness happens, and it just goes on, and you wonder, what's the end of it? And in Psalm 73, Psalm of Asaph, surely God is good to Israel, to the pure in heart. And he's starting out by saying he knows the fact that God is good to Israel, that he is good. But as for me, my feet almost slipped. My steps nearly slid out from under me, for I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. We all can get into that same trap. We look around at what's going on, and our feet can slide in the area of being set apart to God. For there are no pains at their death. Their body is healthy. They have none of humanity's trouble, nor are they plagued like others. Therefore they put on pride like a necklace, and violence wraps around them like a garment. Their eyes budge out from fatness. The imaginations of their hearts runs wild. They scoff and wickedly plan evil. From on high they threaten. They set their mouth against heaven. Their tongue struts through the earth. Pride again, isn't it? Seems almost like Paul's writing to Timothy here. And so they say, how does God know? And does Elion have knowledge? Behold, such are the wicked, always at ease and amassing wealth. Seems so backwards, doesn't it? The wicked seem to win, evil seems to prevail, and you wonder, what's the end of it all? And it makes no sense. And he says this, but when I tried to make sense of this, it was troubling in my eyes until I entered the sanctuary of God and perceived their end. That really hit me. You know, for Asaph, the light came on when Asaph came out of the unholy, out of the profane, out of the wickedness, and entered the sanctuary of God. He suddenly realized what their end was. Elizabeth Elliot says, holiness has never been the driving force of the majority. It is, however, mandatory for anyone who wants to enter the kingdom. And her quote kind of springs off of what it says in Hebrews 12:14. Pursue shalom with everyone and the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. Holiness. If we don't come out and if we're not separated, we don't see him. And he's called us to holiness. And so holiness, be holy. Why? Because he is holy. He is different. He is set apart. He is unlike any other so-called God out there. There's none like unto him. And he's called us to the same, to be like him. Be kadosh, for I am kadosh. Now, when we think of holiness, I know a lot of things can come to your mind instantly. When I think of holiness, the first phrase that always pops into my mind is that old adage, oh, well, you're just trying to be holier than thou attitude. And how destructive that's actually been to adopt that kind of language. But holiness, you know, what aspect of life are we called to be holy in? Is holiness just a spiritual concept? Is it just something that is out there and you just understand, yeah, we're be holy, and as long as you repeat that and say that holy, 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 that's it? Is that all it is? Is it just a spiritual concept? Is holiness just in what we look at? Well, I know that's perversion. I know that's wicked. I shouldn't look on it. I'm going to come out and not look upon that. Is that all it is? Is it just merely what we eat? You know, we've learned that's holy. That is not. That's food. That's not food. This is clean. This is unclean. Is it just in all of that? Go back in time for a minute. How many were here or remember or have listened to a message I did 4 years ago on the Shabbat? Been a while. The message, I titled it Shabbat, a Sign of Love. And the idea that I was trying to get across in that was that the Shabbat, we don't keep Shabbat, we don't attempt to keep Shabbat, rather, out of a sense of, well, I'm going to get spanked if I don't. But Shabbat being a sign between God and his people, when we keep Shabbat, my thing was it's a sign of love. It's a sign of love to us from him. He's given it to his people out of love. And when we keep it with him, it's a sign of our love back to him. And in that message, I bounced off of the common passage we read about a lot in Acts 15. Therefore, I judge not to trouble those turning from among the Gentiles who are turning to God, but to write to them to abstain from the contamination of idols, from sexual immorality, from what is strangled, and from blood. For Moses from ancient generations has had in every city those who proclaim him, since he's read in the synagogues every Shabbat. I brought up how that the Gentiles that are turning to God, there's these initial essentials that they're required to do. But how much of this, all of this, has been removed from discipleship in the last 2,000 years? More and more, we've gotten further and further away from all of these things. So if these are the essentials, and so many focus on the first four, and I believe there's 7 essentials in this passage, but everyone will stop at the first 4. And there's the 3 that are typically left out, which is what my message dealt with then was on the Shabbat, the day. That's been left out. Shabbat is a holy time. It's a holy day. It's not supposed to be like the other 6 days of the week. It's set apart. It's to be different. There's things that we emphasize doing on Shabbat because we don't have time or can't focus on those things the other 6 days of the week. And there's things that we refrain from doing on Shabbat, whether it's buying, selling, working. So there's a lot of things we do and we don't do on Shabbat, and the whole point is to, let me back up here. The commandment, we know it, right? Remember Yom Shabbat, remember the Sabbath day. And there's a lot of people that stop right there and they say, well, Gentiles that are coming to God just need to remember Yom Shabbat, just remember the Sabbath day. You don't have to do anything, just remember it. You just get to it and acknowledge it's there. Oh, it's Shabbat. And you just go on. And that's actually taught. But it says, remember Yom Shabbat. Why? To keep it holy. There's a reason you remember it. It's to keep it holy. It's to go with action. But we've had the day removed. Then we've had the content removed. Moses, the Torah. We talk about the Torah a lot, don't we? That it's set apart, it's holy, because it's set apart. It's not like all the other documents out there. It's not like all the other writings throughout history. It's God's Word. But I think one of the most forgotten ones is that in addition to having the day and content removed, we've also had the place removed. We've had holy space, holy place, a physical place removed. And without the day, the content, and the place, I believe proper discipleship can be very, very, very limited, if not almost impossible to achieve. Because how do you learn what holiness means when you've had all the holy things removed? All the things that are set apart to God are no longer there. How do you learn what holiness means? Since I've been in this walk of faith, I've seen that a lot of Gentiles that come in this direction, they seem like they get to the Shabbat and they approach that and they go, wait a minute, we should be doing this. This never should have been given up. The Shabbat's for me too. And they get there and they realize all of that, and then okay, well, I'm going to start trying to keep Shabbat. And that's a good thing. Don't hinder them in that. That's a good thing. And then all of a sudden they approach the Torah and go, the Torah is we should never have given this up. What happened? Why are we so far from it? This was written for me too. And they start looking into the commandments of God and trying to follow his ways, and that's a good thing. Don't hinder. But then we get to the third one, synagogue, and all of a sudden, it's game over. And there's so many that will get to that point and take on the first two, and they get to the synagogue, and that's the end of the story. All of a sudden, that's too Jewish, and it stops right there. And so I truly believe, even in a lot of Messianic circles, we have lost the meaning of holy space, of a holy place. Synagogue. It's a word that it seems like to Gentiles immediately seems to bring out what's going on in the heart, what's going on in the attitude toward his people, toward his place. It seems to really discern. You can talk about the Torah and Shabbat even to a large degree, and you bring up the word synagogue, and all of a sudden it's game over. Sometimes it immediately makes a believer think of certain verses that they read about, which the way things get translated and the way things get brought out by those that use them, they get construed into things that end up being deep anti-Semitism even in the church. One of the best examples of that is this in Revelation 2. To the angel of Messiah's community in Smyrna write, thus says the first and last, who was dead and came to life, I know your tribulation and your poverty, yet you are rich, as well as the slander of those who say they are Jewish and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. And then in chapter 3, behold, I will cause those of the synagogue of Satan, those who say they are Jewish and are not, but lie, behold, I will cause them to come and bow down before your feet, so that they acknowledge that I have loved you. I could go deep into this one, both from a historical context and whatever else, but people look at this and they immediately link synagogue equals Satan. How many have heard that? Like the synagogue of Satan. And that seems like, especially in the last little bit here, that's becoming more, and I'm seeing that more and more spreading around. Now read it again. Is it saying that those who are Jewish are the synagogue of Satan, or those who are lying and are not? So it's saying those who say they're Jewish and aren't are the synagogue of Satan. Now people will twist that and say, well, see, it says that the true Jews are the ones, not the ones that say that they are. I've heard that. It's the dumbest thing. But basically, if you say you're Jewish, you're not, and therefore you're in the synagogue of Satan. Now, he's talked about this in the last few weeks about who is truly Jewish. And it's not so much everything that's on the outside as what's on the inside, right? He's a Jew who's one inwardly. It's not just about what's the outside, not just about the bloodline. But putting all that aside, I can get deep into that. We're not going to go there today. But we really want to take this and say, just from these couple verses that say that synagogue equals evil equals Satan. Do we really want to do that? So I want to preface everything I'm going to say from this point on, just to say that nothing that I share today is not directed at any one person, any one place, any one practice, anything like that. I want to do an overview, kind of like I did a 101 on the Shabbat. I want to do a 101 on the synagogue, and I want to bring it back into some meaning that I think that we've lost. So synagogue, it's actually a Greek word. It's not a Hebrew word. It's a Greek word. And it means a bringing together. So I'm right off of what we just read in Revelation 3. I just started right there with synagogue, right in that word. It's a bringing together, a gathering as of fruits. It's a contracting. So it's a gathering together. It's also used as an assembling together. So it's in that sense. So if you were to look at the definition of it and place it back into Revelation 3 and say, behold, I will cause those of the gathering of Satan, or the assembling of Satan, it's suddenly lost its nasty sound, hasn't it? So, and I think sometimes translators particularly decide to translate a word in some places and not others out of biases or other things they have going on. They're not always consistent. In the King James, it's used 57 times. In the New Testament, synagogue is rendered as synagogue. We've looked at 2 of them. Are the other 55 all synagogue equals evil? Bouncing off that word synagogue in Revelation 3, and you look at the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament of the Tanakh. The word that gets used there's a couple, but there's the one I looked at it's mainly used is kavah, and it means to collect or bind together. Now the difference between this is synagogue, collect or bind together. This isn't referring to the people themselves. It's not the ecclesia, the church, the community. Synagogue, it's the coming together. It's actually the act of coming together, the place of coming together. It isn't referring necessarily to the people themselves. When you look at kavah, the first time that it's used is in Genesis 1:9. Then God said, let the water below the sky be gathered together to one place, and let the dry ground appear. And it happened so. So when you think of God gathering, is it evil that comes to mind? When God does something and brings something together, is it evil? Interestingly enough, though, the word also is used, also means to wait or look eagerly for. I found that very fascinating. And I could have kept going deep into this, but for instance, the first time it's rendered that way or used that way, for your salvation, I wait, Adonai. Li Yeshuatecha kavati, Adonai. For your salvation, I synagogue. For your salvation, I kavah. I gather together and wait, Adonai. Now, does that sound like the word is pointing or directing us to Adonai, to the Lord, to Yeshua? So what is the point of gathering together? I mean, why are we here right now? Why are congregations around the world assembling right now? What's the point of it all? If we can have it all in us, why do we gather together? So take a moment. I'm going to go through some things about the synagogue and its role in the gathering, the assembling, and what we're eagerly looking forward to, what we're eagerly awaiting on. The synagogue, number one, it points to Jerusalem. Almost all synagogues, when they're built, they're built so that when you're worshiping, you're facing east. And as is the case here in the United States anyway, they're lined up to face east. And we're blessed. We're able, be facing east. And it's pointing somewhere. It's not about here. It's about where our attention needs to be. It's directing us someplace. It's get our attention focused outside of where we're at. Number two, it models the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, the holy house. The synagogue set up in such a way that it models what was in the temple. Starting off, there's the ark, right? It's the seat of God's throne that was in the holiest of holy. That was in the holiest place that there was. In front of the ark that was blocking off the Holy of Holies was the parachet, the curtain. So even today, the ark will have a curtain over it. And it's representing something inside that's set apart to God. Then there's the Ner Tamid, which is the eternal flame. That it's the light that never goes off, that represents the menorah that was in front of the curtain, shedding light on it, and that light was never to go off. So to this day in the synagogue, the Ner Tamid represents the eternal flame, the eternal light. And in the holiest of holy, in the Holy of Holies, what was there next to the ark? What was the most? What was placed there? What was next to the ark placed? Not in the ark, next to the ark in the Holy of Holies. The Torah. Interesting. There's two things in there: ark and the Torah. So here it is. That scroll in the Holy of Holies. Kind of helps you put a light on why maybe the Torah is set aside as holy and revered and reverenced. That when the Torah is brought out and it's brought around, it's the idea of not even so much wanting to touch it as using it, using Bible, a songbook, whatever else, out of that reverence to it, that I'm unworthy to even handle the word of life. We understand that the Torah is Messiah written. So it's handled as such. Then on top of that, there's the bima, which is when you think in the Mishkan or in the temple, in front of the curtain, what was placed right out here in the center was the altar. And so the bima it means platform or pulpit as it gets rendered. And so it's the location of the altar. And I think that's interesting because the church hasn't quite lost everything yet. They still have what's called an altar call, where you come up and to the front and you're saying, God, forgive me. God, I need to get this straight with you. I need to, whatever it is, I need to make this right and restore fellowship. But the bima in Deuteronomy 31, 10 through 12 it was where the Torah was read from every 7 years on the sabbatical year. During the Feast of Sukkot, the Torah was read from start to finish in front of everyone. And that was the place it was done, was at the altar. Then there's also what's called an aliyah. And aliyah means going up. So that's what it means, going up. Come, let us go up. Let us make aliyah to the mountain of Adonai, to the house of the God of Jacob, to be. Why? Why are you making aliyah? To go up, to be, to learn to walk in his ways. For Torah will go forth from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. So an aliyah is that calling up to the Torah, when one is called up to be present at the reading of the Torah for the same, it's representing the same thing. You're desiring to learn his ways and walk in his paths. Then on top of that, we have the service structure in times. The synagogue also is set up with its services to model what was going on in the temple. You have two main services, and then there's a third, but there's the shachrit, which is the morning service. Then there's the mincha, the afternoon service, and then there's an evening one that at the turn of the day called the mariv. And those services model, they're replicating what was going on in the temple, what was going on in God's holy house when the morning sacrifice and the afternoon sacrifice was taking place. Even to this day, the Amidah, the standing prayers, are taking place generally at that time when the sacrifice, when the offerings were made. When one went in, or when there was an offering made at the altar, everyone was standing, and it kind of comes down to that. So, kind of like an offering, when you're praying, you're offering up blessings and praise to God. And even in the Avodah, one of the standing prayers is that asking for the sanctuary's restoration. So it's kind of putting the synagogue back to, it's kind of like a branch office, so to speak. It's representing a central office somewhere, but it doesn't replace it. It's not the central office, but it's modeling. But just as the synagogue or as the temple has these physical aspects to it, there's also, it's no good if there's no one there, right? It's kind of meaningless. So I want to look at how the one who enters the synagogue, one who enters, think of it in terms of how you would enter the temple. You know, when you first come in, there's the Mezzuzah on the doorposts. And it's kind of that moment when you come in, there's the Mezzuzah we've got them on our doorposts here. And they've got the scripture contained in them. And usually when one comes in, they touch it and kiss it. And it's that moment of kind of connecting the physical to the spiritual. It's not so much just what's in your head or heart. You're forcing your body to recognize something. You're forcing the physical to also recognize you've entered a set-apart place. You've entered something not like everything else. You've come out from all that wickedness, profanity, the vileness that's out there, and you're coming in to a set-apart place. When you think about when you put a mezuzah on your doorpost at home, it's functioning the same way. When you come to it, this home is set apart, this home is dedicated, this home is not like everything else out there in the world. There's things that need to stay on the outside that don't need to come in. I'll touch on a couple other touchy subjects, but again, I just want to do kind of a 101 and help everybody understand why things are the way that they are, shed some light on it, and give some consideration to it. One that, for the men that enter in, there's the Kippah. This little hat that covers my cowlicks. I like it for that reason, because I got a really bad one back here that it's always giving me grief, and this, I don't have to worry about it when I've got this on. But Kippah, it comes from the root word kafah, which means to curve or bow down. So the idea is, what are you curving or bowing down to? You know, it's understood as a sign of authority. That a woman's authority is her husband, and the man's authority is what? One he can't see. woman has an authority with her that is physically present, but us guys don't have that. And so they understand this to mean that it's a physical connection, a physical reminder that there's one above you. And that we're under a greater authority. And some will say, well, this is, okay, that's for Jews only, not for Gentiles. That's only something Jews need to do. Or we could get off into another rabbit trail on the Corinthians, I believe it is, passage on whether you pray with your head covered or not. If you're curious about that, I think it's on the website. There's a article on what that passage is dealing with. But I remember the first time, before I was in this direction or at all, I had a job I needed to go look at down in Chattanooga, and it happened to be at a part of a synagogue. And it wasn't the synagogue specifically, but I ended up parking. There was no parking at the building I was at, so I ended up parking in the synagogue's parking lot. And somebody came out to see what I was there for, and I said, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, that's actually our building, whatever, you can just follow me. And we got to the doors, and he says, please put this on. I've never done this before, but okay. Put it on, and that stuck with me ever since, that it was this idea that there's an authority above me. I'm coming into a set-apart place, and it didn't matter. He'd never asked me, well, are you Jewish or are you not? It was just, do this. Out of respect and reverence. And I kind of think it's really an awesome reminder that Jew, Gentile, we're all under authority. You know, we have the leader of the most powerful nation on earth. Kind of interesting. He comes to the place of the sanctuary, and all of a sudden there's this realization, or this moment of realizing there's an authority greater than you are. You know, even those that put on an act, or acknowledge, still, there's an authority greater than them, whether they want to admit it or not. Then there's those that truly do desire to walk in God's ways. When they come to it, they realize that there's a higher authority. I'll park here for a minute because this was really hitting me when I looked at this picture. All of a sudden, something just kind of dawned on me. You know, this was a man that was beginning to understand all these things. He was starting to come more and more in this direction. He understood that there was a higher authority, was beginning to understand the meaning of Torah. He loved the Jewish people. His last book that he wrote just before he was killed was called Stop in the Name of God, Why Honoring the Sabbath Will Transform Your Life. And right after he was killed, I remember, soon as it got kind of starting to spread around some, that was the last book that he wrote, I started seeing comments about, this is going to revolutionize the church. This is going to be a revival in the church. And I thought, look out. Because if it has the ability to do that, if there's something to it, you watch. Between now and then, there's going to be a massive effort to discredit this and distract from it and get totally off into something else. And of course, one of the big things I've seen in the last week as it's starting to be released was he didn't write this at all. This was written by Israel, and the Jews put this book out and killed him so they could, just all this crazy stuff going on. But all of a sudden, all this stuff revolving around him, all of a sudden I was starting to there's a bigger thing, because I think it's to derail from what he was truly about. and what he desired. If you can discredit it in any way, the enemy's going to attempt to do that. And you know, even the richest, most influential people, and it doesn't matter who they are when they approach the point of the sanctuary, there's, whether they want to admit it or not, there's a higher authority. And I went through a lot of pictures just kind of pondering on all this. And whether this is the proper way to do it or not isn't necessarily the point. It's that recognition that this is what's been done for a long time. It's what the community of Israel, the Jewish people, have done for a very long time. And whether Jew or Gentile, it kind of really painted a pretty picture to me that what are we eagerly waiting for? What are we eagerly looking for? No matter where we come from, our focus is that the King, one of these days, at this place just beyond where he's standing right now, there will be a place where God's going to rule and reign in complete authority. All the nations are going to flow to it. And, you know, in that day, he'll be king over all the earth. Even in the what is it, Yiddish word for it, the yarmulke or the yarmulke literally means it's awe of the king. And you know, indeed, Israel, both the natural born and those that are the outsider living among them, they were called to be what? A kingdom of priests. It's also connected to that the priests wore on their head as a sign that there was an authority higher than them, that even as people came to them, they weren't the authority. Now, recognizing authority and obeying it are kind of two different things, isn't it? Not so much. There's a lot of people know about that he's God and he's going to, it doesn't mean they want to obey. And that's kind of where the Tallit comes in. You know, this garment, what's its function, and where did it come from? It's based out of Deuteronomy 2:12. You're to make for yourself twisted threads on the four corners of your garment in which you cover yourself. Back in the day, the clothing was a lot different than now. It was pretty much just a rectangular garment, had a hole cut in the top, slid over your head and was sewed down the sides, had four corners, and he's saying to tie and put these on those four corners. Well, our clothing has undergone a massive change through the centuries, and at least in our Western culture, we don't dress that way anymore. But just because our clothing changes, nevertheless, does the commandment still need to be obeyed? Does that mean just because culture and fashion dictates that here's how we dress now, does that just mean, well, now you don't have to worry about that? So this was one of the ways that it was preserved, was it's a four-cornered garment that you can cover yourself with that has these on the four corners. This is the Tallit Gadol, the great Tallit. There's also some that are worn underneath that are called the Tallit Katan, and it's just an undershirt with the zitzit on them. But again, why? You know, why is this even a thing? We read it every week. Speak to Bnei Israel and say to them they are to make for themselves zitzit on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and they are to put a blue cord on each zitzit. It'll be your own zitzit. Whenever you look at them, you'll remember all the mitzvot of Adonai and do them, and not go spying out after your own hearts, your own eyes, prostituting yourselves. This way you'll remember and obey all my mitzvot, and you will be holy to your God. So he's saying that these were, the zitzit were to be a physical reminder of obeying God's commandments, obeying his mitzvot. And it's kind of like, usually a boy gets his first tallit at his bar mitzvah, when he's accepting taking on the commandments of God. And one of the commandments is to do this, so it's literally you're physically obeying one of them by taking them on. If that makes any sense. It puts it into action almost immediately, right off the bat. But the point and the reason of it all is to be holy, to be different. That's just like he created man in the garden to be different from all the rest of the animals. He's asking for his people, as mankind has debased himself to being basically an animal. He's calling his people, be different, come out, be different. Some things to set you aside. And that was like, you look at a crowd of people and you think, how do you distinguish one from the other? Some of these things that God commanded to his people, you look at this guy and he stands out quite a bit, don't he? And I think about the commandments in that way. We say this isn't about justification, it's about sanctification, right? That all the things, outward or inward, they're all to set us apart, all to make us holy. And I always love this little cartoon. If we're going to obey him in all this, we're going to stick out like a sore thumb. Anybody else feel like they stick out like a sore thumb wherever you work? You're the oddball guy that doesn't do what everyone else is doing, isn't going where everyone else is going, isn't talking like everybody else. Anyway, being kind of sticking out like a sore thumb. Now then, if you listen closely to my voice and keep my covenant, you'll be my own treasure from among all people, for all the earth is mine. So as for you, you will be to me a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy nation. These are the words you're to speak to Bnei Israel. The passage where it says that it's prophesied that the nations one day will take hold of the zit of one that's Jewish, of the Jewish people. Obviously, if they didn't obey this, there would be no zit to take hold of, literally. And that makes the Gentile unable to take hold of the commandments either. But I could be forever going through some of this stuff. I got off on all kinds of trails with all of it, but I just wanted to kind of go through some of the things, a lot of the things that people ask and question and trying to wrestle with and decide on, just trying to put some perspective on it, what it's all toward. Then there's the one that's in the synagogue too, also, is the covering of the eyes. The Jewish people, when they recite the Shema, when they get to the Shema, the eyes are covered. And you ask yourself, well, why? What's the point of all of that? And, when one asked Yeshua, what's the greatest commandment in Mark 12, what's the greatest commandment of all of them? And he said, the greatest commandment is Shema Israel. Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, the central declaration. So for starters, when they do that, it's the idea that there's intense concentration. You're concentrating intently on what you're saying. It's limiting distractions. But you're also putting faith and belief in something you're not able to see. It's a moment where you're making that declaration and you're focusing on the inward and saying that you're seeing from the heart. You're seeing from the mind, the soul. It's not about what reality isn't what our natural eyes see. And it also points to that moment, this being the central declaration of who God is, also points kind of to that moment where Moses says, show me your glory. And he said, you can't look at me, for no man can see my face and live. But what did he do? He put him in the cleft of the rock and then took his hand and covered his eyes. And it's a reminder that we're not there yet. We're still in this body, in this place, but we're looking forward to something. Then there's the matovu. how goodly. We start off by stating how good all of this is. And every synagogue service around the world starts this way, whether it's either said in unison like we do, or it's said by the individual that when he first enters. He'll do it personally. But when you're coming in, you're making that declaration like, it's good to be here. It's good to be out of all of that. It's good to be here. The synagogue is kind of that training ground in what we know is coming. Do we all believe? I would hope so. Maybe there's some that would disagree, but do we all believe there is a literal physical temple coming where God is going to rule and reign? Not this look-alike that'll come first, but he'll come and rule and reign and take up his seat, and the Lord is going to be in that place physically, literally. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Do we believe that? The synagogue was birthed. It really started during the Babylonian exile. When they're out of the land, there's no temple, there's no land of Israel that they're in, and they're far removed from it. And it was that reminder, a place to go to remind, hey, this isn't forever. God's promised he's coming. We're going to go back. This will be restored. Let's not lose it all. It keeps kind of in mind, it kind of put me to mind of what Paul was talking to Timothy about. I write so you will know how one ought to conduct himself in the house of God, which is the community of the living God, a pillar and foundation of truth. And it's like, if we know that reality is coming, and we're going to be a part of that, I think it's a good idea, in my honest opinion, to work at practicing that holiness. Sometimes what we know is coming, we get really disconnected from it. It's that common excuse that I think we dealt with. Well, yeah, that's for the future, but that's not for now. I'll do that when we get to it. And it's kind of like, well, I understand what you're really saying in a way is kind of, well, I understand holiness, but I'll work at holiness when he makes me do it. When he forces me to do it, then I'll get on board with it. Don't you know that you are God's temple and the Ruach Elohim dwells among you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy him, for God's temple is holy, and you are that temple. There's a few other verses that go with this that talk about how each of us is to be holy. Each of us is to be a temple for God. And if that applies to us individually, how much more so when we're all together? When we're gathered together, should we not be all the more set apart to him? Yeshua loved the holy house. It says he was every day teaching in the temple. And it grieved him when the place of holiness and prayer was desecrated. Since the destruction of the temple, many Jewish thoughts have said, there's been many that have gone this way that says, well, now that there's no temple, the synagogue replaces the temple. And many will say that there's no need for the temple to be built. They don't look forward to it because we've got something that replaces it. And sadly, that kind of goes along with a lot of church doctrine that kind of says the same thing too, that, there's no need for that. That's been done away with, as if it's the first time in history that that's happened. But, we believe in a future reality that the reversal is really the synagogue will bring us back to his holy house. And the synagogue's function, as it was there in Acts 15, was to train and prepare for a time when God dwells among us again. And he's encouraging, like, hey, the Gentiles, this is a training time. When you're here, there's going to come a point where you're going to be accepted up there. And we don't want you to be so blind as to what God expects and how it's going to be. So just as I believe has been so wrong for the Shabbat and the Torah to be removed, I also think it's been a great disservice that the synagogue's also been removed. You know, in Hebrews 10:25, and do not neglect our own meetings as is the habit of some, but encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. The King James words it, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is. So what do you think that word is? Yeah, episynagogue, the synagogue. So do not neglect the synagogue, the gathering together. It was meant to be a place to assemble for the people of God. Ironically, when I was looking at this in the Strong's, they had the definition next to it. The religious assembly of Christians is what a synagogue means. I thought like that made me cackle, because it's like, oh, it means this over in Revelation, but here now the synagogue is the assembly of Christians. Yeah. And truly, the synagogue was meant for Christians, was meant for those that believed in Messiah. It started there. Well, we ask you, brothers and sisters, concerning the coming of our Lord Yeshua, the Messiah, and our gathering together to him. Guess what word's there? Again, it's not the idea. Isn't it the idea that the synagogue, when we gather together, isn't it that idea that we're looking forward to a time when we're gathered together to him? That's kind of why we're all here, is we gather together because this is a foretaste, this is a moment of recognizing there's a greater reality. I don't know about you, but I hate goodbyes. I hate them really bad. And it doesn't matter if it's family, it doesn't matter, you're all family. There's something, even when I'm tired and I need to leave, there's something when I'm gone, it feels like, ugh. You know, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in their midst. There it is again. So here we are. We're in Hanukkah, right? Dedication. You know, a moment when there were some men in the past that realized that it wasn't just about this holiness that they're to live and to obey the commandments, but it was the physical place is also important. And it meant enough that people were willing to lay down their lives to be able to rededicate the holy house, purify it, take what was desecrated, take what was made common, take what was, it was just a building like any other down the street, and put it back to the service of God. You know, it's they kind of understood that in a sense, that thy kingdom come and thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I don't know if we all have that kind of desire or not. You know, then came Hanukkah. It was winter in Jerusalem, and Yeshua was walking in the temple. He understood that dedication to his house was important. You know, in the records of Hanukkah, found in the book of Maccabees, it gives this account of the temple and the use of synagogue and what it's pointing to. In 2 Maccabees, it says, one finds in the records that the prophet Jeremiah ordered those who were being deported to take some of the fire as it has been mentioned, and that the prophet, after giving them the law, instructed those who were being deported not to forget the commandments of the Lord or be led astray in their thoughts or seeing the gold and silver statues with their adornment. And with other similar words, he exhorted them that the law should not depart from their hearts. It was also in the same document that the prophet, having received an oracle, ordered that the tent and ark should follow with him, and that he went to the mountain where Moses had gone up and seen the inheritance of God. Jeremiah came and found a cave dwelling, and he brought there the tent, the ark, the altar of incense, and he sealed up the entrance. Some of those who followed him came up intending to mark the way, but could not find it. When Jeremiah learned of it, he rebuked them and declared, "The place shall remain unknown until God gathers his people together again and shows his mercy. Then the Lord will disclose these things, and the glory of the Lord in cloud will appear, as they were shown in the case of Moses, and as Solomon asked that the place should be specially consecrated." I could go into a lot about that, but it's kind of that whole idea. Don't forget. When you're gone from here, don't forget the law. Don't forget the commandments of God. There's going to come a time when he's going to gather his people together again. And that same glory is going to come down and reside just as it was at Moses, just as it was during Solomon's time. And I truly think we've lost the idea of holy space, a holy space. I think it's also something we need to relearn, work at relearning. Funny enough, even in Baptist history, there used to be a time when holiness and space was so much more than it is today. Enjoyed reading some of these articles. This was 1859 at a dedication of a church, the uses and doctrine of the sanctuary, making sacred our houses of worship. While the article, this message he did was off on a few things, the importance of holiness was stressed. And I remember my parents and my grandparents talking so much more about how things used to be, even in churches, how things used to be so much more set apart, so much more unlike the world and everything out there. I think about when we first came here. Our first service here was on Rosh Hashanah, on the Feast of Trumpets. And we came in and we placed the Mezzuzahs on the doors here. And we had a time of prayer where we were all praying for everything that would go on here. And I don't remember who it was. I just remember there was some lady that specifically, I remember her praying that God would keep this a holy place and keep outside all the things that would contaminate what was in here. That this would be set apart for his glory. So if the synagogue is pointing and training us to a higher place, I just want to ask for our little family here, how much do we love the place that we gather together? What is it leading and pointing us to? Oh Lord, I love the habitation of your house and the place where your glory dwells. For all the hate surrounding the idea of there being a temple one day. And that hate is widespread. The Muslims hate the idea of it being there. Everything is done to prevent that from being a reality. Unfortunately, a lot of the church also hates the idea of there being a temple, again, for various reasons. But, David had a different idea. It's kind of like what Asaph said. David viewed it, a day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere. I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than live in the tents of wickedness. I've often looked at this and I go, oh, David, he's saying that being a doorkeeper is such a base position. And I look at it and I say, what an exalted place to be. I'd love to be the doorkeeper and be able to greet those that are coming in and out. I think one of the neatest things, the best positions there are, is the person who's greeting people coming in and out. He said, "My soul longs, indeed it faints for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh sing for joy to the living God." You know, it's that heart and flesh, the spiritual and the physical coming together. You know, it's reminding your body, not just what's on the inside, it's reminding your body that it also is looking forward to something. And you put the physical into action with something, you're looking forward to something greater coming. You know, we tend to spiritualize everything. At least that's the way I've always known things. So many things growing up in churches and stuff like that. Everything was spiritual. Everything had lost any kind of physical connection anymore. Everything was kind of spiritual, to the point where even in Sunday schools and the way kids were taught, everything was, once upon a time, there was a man named Noah that built this boat with big giraffe heads coming out of it. And, you know, and it was so dumbed down to the point where it was no longer seemed like a reality, like those things happened. One thing I've asked of Adonai, that I will seek, to dwell in the house of Adonai all the days of my life, and to behold the beauty of Adonai, and to meditate in his temple. You know, my desire is I wish I could be more like Joshua, not wanting to leave the tabernacle. Because I want to be where God is, and I look forward to that day when we're face to face. I know this has been long, but on this Hanukkah, you know, as we desire to purify and dedicate our lives, let's also take a moment to think about dedicating when we're gathering together, making that holy, and making, when we're getting together, focused again on him, that we can make this a set apart place as we look forward to what's coming. You know, in our ark here, the blue banner that's up in the back, the words that are on it, I think this just hit me. It says, Basuli Mikdash Bishachani Bedokam. Those words are, have them make a sanctuary for me, so that I may dwell among them. You know, this isn't the sanctuary, but it is a sanctuary. So I would love to see a resurgence, both here and in many places, of the importance of the synagogue, learning how to conduct ourselves again. Because in this aspect, just like there's the things, the inside that needs cleaned up, there's also that we need to prepare as a people, as a gathering together, how we're to conduct ourselves. Learn again, in another aspect, the meaning of holiness. You know, because if we're getting caught up in all the distractions, with all the wickedness that's going on all around us, all that tries to derail us off of our walk with God, it can be something like Asaph, where we can come out for a moment on a set-apart day, at a set-apart place, and listening to set-apart content. And just like Asaph, when we come into a set-apart place, we can know that this isn't the end of it. There's something greater coming. Because God is here, and he's working in our lives even here, is he not? I'd like to go ahead and say, we could say this together for the second time. We've done it today. Kind of where we started with the Matovu. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. In your abundant loving kindness, O God, I will bow down toward your holy temple in reverence of you. I love your house, Adonai, the place where your glory dwells. Come, let us bow down and worship. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker. May my prayer now, Eternal One, find favor before you. In your great love, O God, answer me with the truth of your salvation. Li Yeshuatecha kavati Adonai, for your salvation we wait, Adonai.